Ghost of Tsushima is one of 2020's best, and I'm someone who is incredibly relieved to be saying this. Now, the reason for this feeling of relief is because I very rarely anticipate a game's release anymore. Over my 20 or so odd years of gaming, it can more often than not lead to some disappointment as you build a game up in your head. Ghost of Tsushima was a game that since its announcement back in 2017, I've been waiting to get my hands on, but because I've been burnt before, I was cautiously optimistic. Little did I know that it would end up better than I could have imagined, and that's why I'm making this video. Now, if you're a subscriber of mine already, you may have noticed I haven't reviewed many new games this year, so it may seem odd to talk about a game that, at least topically, isn't as relevant as it once was. Originally, I never intended to make a video on Ghost of Tsushima, because reviews were releasing days before the game was even released to the public, which makes it hard to compete for a channel my size. But I'll be honest, it's also because some games I like to play just for myself. This allows me to still enjoy this hobby of mine that can at times feel like work when I'm constantly playing games just for videos. However, it didn't take long for me to realize that this game is something special, and I had to talk about it. This, unfortunately though, brings me to my spoiler warning. I know I can't stop myself from talking about a game without limits, but for me personally, I don't want to be coming back to make another video about the game in the future because I hampered this video trying to beat around the bush. There are plenty of spoiler-free reviews that I do recommend you go and watch, and I essentially gave you my spoiler-free thoughts right off the bat. Go play this game. I am going to be breaking this game down and really talk about Ghost of Tsushima in depth, and so if you haven't yet experienced this game and want to keep yourself completely blind, I recommend stopping the video here. The video is not going anywhere and will be ready for your viewing pleasure when you're ready. But if you played through the game already or don't care about spoilers, you're in the right place. So, let's begin. This is my Ghost of Tsushima critique. Before I jump into Ghost of Tsushima itself, I think it's important to go over the history behind the game. I will make this clear though, it was never Sucker Punch's goal to make the game historically accurate. Ghost of Tsushima is a work of fiction, and so Jin and his quest isn't a true story. However, the game's foundation is very much based on historical events, primarily seen in the game's beginning. So let's dive into the events prior to the Mongolian invasion of Tsushima and the true history behind the battle we experience in-game. The first question is, how did the Mongols discover Tsushima Island and why did they invade? Well, in a series of Mongol invasions in Korea between the years 1231 and 1281, Japanese pirates primarily based on the nearby island of Tsushima were raiding Korea, along with many on the island making a living off the sea due to Tsushima's mountainous terrain. These raids and attacks on Korea would bring Japan and Tsushima to the Mongols' attention, as in 1259, King Gojong of Korea signed a treaty of favor with the Mongols, becoming a vassal state. The invasion of Tsushima didn't begin until 1274 because initially Kublai Khan sent messengers with demands to Japan to also become a vassal state between the years of 1266 to 1272. These demands were denied repeatedly, and so the Mongols' invasion preparations had begun. So the next question is, how did the invasion of Tsushima go? Well, we experience a pretty accurate depiction within the game. A small force of samurais of Tsushima prepared to defend their land at Komoda Beach against what was described as 8,000 Mongol warriors on 900 ships. The Japanese had attempted to negotiate before the battle had begun, but these attempts were ignored by the Mongols. The samurai of Tsushima did well to defend their land against such an immense force, as their archers killed many Mongols, along with one samurai cutting down 25 Mongols himself. Unfortunately though, much like the game's beginning, the Mongols eventually just overwhelmed the Tsushima forces and saw them all killed. With victory secured at Komada, the Mongols went on and burned down most of the buildings of Tsushima, slaughtering most of the inhabitants, and took the next few days to secure control of the island. This is Ghost of Tsushima's foundation into history. The Mongols' invasion, the small force of samurai feeling almost like a retelling of the 300, and the Mongols claiming control over Tsushima is all real history. Now, Jin Sakai and the game's cast of characters is a work of fiction, but it doesn't make the game's setting or feeling of playing through history any less enthralling. Basing the game's setting in real history creates the intrigue, but creating their own characters that don't have predetermined death or life events that could have possibly hampered the story's direction allowed Sucker Punch to still have a freedom to tell the story they wanted. Historical accuracy wasn't Sucker Punch's objective, but you can tell they really respected this time period in Japan's history, and it makes you ask questions like, is this real or what really happened here, that makes for a great introduction into learning more about other cultures and their histories. Ghost of Tsushima's story begins with a battle. The year is 1274, and the Japanese island of Tsushima is amidst an invasion from the Mongolian fleet. Jin Sakai, our protagonist, joins a small force of local samurai led by his uncle Lord Shimura as they attempt to fight back against the Mongols, a fight where the samurai are outnumbered at least 10 to 1. This local samurai force know they probably won't survive this attack, but as samurai, they do not fear death and will die to protect their land. The battle begins with a challenge to a one-on-one fight between the Mongols and samurai's best warriors, which is where we are introduced to the game's antagonist, Khotan Khan. This fight is where we quickly learn that the Mongols have no honor code, and where the samurai are bound to this code, the Mongols are not, as we see when Khotan lights the samurai ablaze before lopping his head off, which begins the true battle of Komada Beach. The battle quickly ends in disaster and sees the entire samurai army of Tsushima killed, Lord Shimura captured, and Jin on death's door and left for dead. It's through the Mongols capturing Lord Shimura that we learn that whilst without honor, Khotan Khan is not stupid. Whilst the warriors of Tsushima had been sitting idle, Khotan had been learning the Japanese language, traditions, and beliefs, and uses this knowledge to not only take Tsushima, but to be able to retain it. Jin is found though and nursed back to health by a local thief named Yuna, and quickly brings Jin up to speed with all that he's missed while recovering. Tsushima has fallen under Mongol control. Jin believes if he can get his uncle back, they can regroup and retake the island, but after attempting to free him alone, he is defeated in combat by Khotan and subsequently thrown off a bridge. Jin survives the fall and quickly comes to terms with the fact that he cannot fight back against the Mongols alone. He will need help to not only free his uncle, but to stop Khotan Khan. Okay, so Act 1 in terms of the main plot consists of Jin finding allies to help take back Castle Kaneda and helping us free Lord Shimura. That's the big objective that the first act constantly reminds us of when we complete the main missions. However, what the first act is really about is Jin coming to terms with the fact that the samurai code may not be the way to defeat the Mongols. To explain this struggle a little easier, we need to visit some of the flashbacks throughout the game that show not only Jin's backstory and his close relationship to his uncle, but the rules of engagement for the samurai which we need to break in order to succeed. In regards to Jin's backstory, he was raised by his uncle, Lord Shimura, from a young age after his mother had passed away and his father was killed in front of him. Yeah, a rough childhood to say the least. It was after the death of Jin's father that Lord Shimura began training Jin to become a samurai and continue the Sakai clan's legacy. This information is discovered by the player though after we learn about what it means to be a samurai, which makes sense considering it's such a huge driving point for the story and Jin's inner conflict. As a samurai, you must set an example for the people. You must have control over your emotions, honor your lord, and fight with honor, which is represented well when Lord Shimura and Jin are attacked by an assassin. The assassin fights without honor, striking from the shadows while their enemy's back is turned, and shows Jin from an early age that this method is used by cowards, not samurai. Samurai face their enemies face to face and either kill them or die with honor. Again though, these are the rules Jin must break in order to stop this invasion. But I want to bring up this quote that establishes what Jin believes honor means.
Tell me the virtues that guide us.
Loyalty to our Lord, control over our emotions, and
You know this.
honor, to fight bravely and uphold the legacy of Clan Sakai.
Those are your father's words. What does honor mean to you?
I guess protecting people, the ones who can't fight for themselves.
This quote is very important because it shows whilst Jin is trained in the way of the samurai, his idea of honor doesn't necessarily mean fighting fair. Back to the main story though. Now I'll go over each of these characters' side stories later in the video, even though these characters and their stories do form a bulk of what you'll be doing in Act 1. But for now, all we need to know is Jin manages to recruit Lady Masako, a female samurai, Sensei Ishikawa, a master archer, Yuna the thief and her brother Taka, the blacksmith, Kenji a merchant, and Ryuzo, a failed samurai turned mercenary, and his straw hat Ronin. Whilst acquiring and helping our allies, we've been disrupting the Mongol operations and liberating towns across the island. Just not as a samurai. Jin needs to do whatever he can to survive and help the people of Tsushima, which has led him to fight the Mongols dishonorably, and is how the legend of the ghost begins. Khotun Khan even informs Lord Shimura of our actions, but he does not believe him, as it is not the samurai way. It's also here in the dialogue between Lord Shimura and Khotun Khan where we learn the Khan plans on using the samurai and residents of Tsushima to build his forces enough to be able to take the mainland from the shogun. Back to Jin though, now with the means to scale the castle walls and our allies ready, we begin to retake Castle Kaneda, but Ryuzo and his Ronin are nowhere to be seen. Whilst inside the castle walls is where we find Ryuzo, but he's not here to help. Jin has a bounty on his head, and Ryuzo intends on collecting that bounty in order to feed his men who have been starving, even if that means killing his old friend. Obviously, this attempt fails, but instead of accepting Jin's second chance at joining the fight for their home, Ryuzo flees, now forever a traitor. Jin and company manage to retake the castle and free Lord Shimura, but Khotun Khan is long gone, heading north to conquer Toyotama. With Lord Shimura now free though, things are beginning to look up for Tsushima, even if Jin is personally scolded by his uncle for his actions as the ghost, which is where the conflict between the two begins, as we quickly see how stuck in his ways Lord Shimura is. Act 2 is more or less along the same lines as the first, and sees Jin recruit more allies in order to retake Castle Shimura. These new recruits are Norio the warrior monk, and the Yarikawa clan, as well as Lord Shimura sneaking a message off island back to the Shogun for reinforcements, and Jin reclaiming his family armor. Again, I'll get to Norio's story later in the video, but the rest of this act's objectives each have their own significance in the story. In terms of the message to the Shogun, this is not just a message to send reinforcements, but also a request for Lord Shimura to adopt Jin as his son. An emotional moment for Jin, as even though they disagree with the tactics to approach fighting the Mongols, he was raised from a young age by his uncle, and is the only family Jin has left. The Yarikawa clan is not an easy ally for Jin to acquire though, as the two clans have their negative history with one another. But this fight against the Mongols is bigger than their history, and so Jin agrees to help the Yarikawa clan fend off the Mongols. I haven't been bringing these moments up, but this fight is important because it's here that the legend of the ghost reaches its peak, as Jin slaughters the Mongol general. The legend of the ghost is now known throughout Tsushima, and the Mongols now fear Jin. Last but almost most important is acquiring our family's armor, where we are introduced to Yuriko, who teaches Jin to make poison to use against the Mongols. Before we can begin our attack on the castle though, we hear word that Ryuzo is attempting to flank our army, and Lord Shimura sends Jin to put a stop to him. Taka decides to tag along and help distract the Mongol camp, but this quickly goes sideways and sees both Taka and Jin captured and face to face with Khotan Khan. Khotan offers Jin a chance to surrender, but refuses, and so Khotan frees Taka and orders him to kill Jin so he can be set free. Taka takes the sword but attempts to kill the Khan instead, which results in Taka being beheaded in front of Jin, and leaves his body as a reminder to Jin that he could have saved him if he had surrendered. Jin manages to free himself and return to begin our attack to reclaim Shimura Castle, as we push the Mongols back, but we run into a brick wall as the Mongols employ tactics that see the samurai sustain massive casualties. Lord Shimura insists on sending more samurai to meet their inevitable end, to maintain the samurai code and his sense of honor, whereas Jin believes his uncle is needlessly killing his men, and whilst honorable, is nonsensical, when the way of the ghost could defeat the Mongols alone and save the people of Tsushima. To avoid more lives needlessly being lost, Jin sneaks into the keep and poisons the Mongols through their food against his uncle's wishes. But instead of finding Khotan Khan within the keep's walls, we instead find Ryuzo. Ryuzo begs for forgiveness and does not want to kill Jin, but it's too late and Jin defeats him in a duel. After the duel, Jin finds his uncle and the Shogun surrounding him. Lord Shimura confronts Jin for his actions and warns him that the Shogun will want a head for his crimes, but gives Jin an out if he gives up Yuna instead, still offering Jin the chance to be adopted as his son, but no more of the ghost. Jin refuses this request.
I am not your son. I am the ghost.
This leads to Jin being thrown in jail for his crimes, awaiting judgment from the Shogun, and sees Lord Shimura burn the documents for Jin's adoption. An uncertain amount of time later, Jin is freed by Kenji, who informs us that all our allies and the people of Tsushima are with the ghost and will help him figure out a way to stop the Khan. Jin manages to escape his imprisonment, but before he can leave, he is shot at with arrows, which sees our horse gravely injured and eventually die, which leads us into Act 3, feeling like everything has fallen apart. The beginning of the final act doesn't get much better though, As Jin searches for Yuna, he is hit with a poison arrow, the Mongols employing his tactics against him, but before he can die, once again is rescued by Yuna. Now obviously, being the final act, the story begins to wrap up rather quickly and sees this act consist of regrouping with our allies and finally killing Khotun Khan. However, to successfully attack the Khan's fort, we will need a plan, and quick, as Khotun Khan is preparing to leave Tsushima with ships filled with Jin's poison to use to conquer the mainland as well. In order for Jin and his allies to stand a chance of attacking the fort, Jin sneaks into Castle Shimura, even though he is still a wanted man, to get a message to his uncle about the Khan's plans in the hopes he will help in the attack. This leads to the final battle in the game, as we slaughter countless Mongols before Lord Shimura and the Shogun attack the fort, distracting the Mongols and allowing Jin to face Khotun Khan. Jin manages to kill the Khan, the Mongol threat is done on Tsushima, or at least lessened, but the story isn't over just yet. We receive a letter from Lord Shimura to meet him at our original training spot, but when we arrive, it isn't for Jin to be forgiven by his uncle. Lord Shimura informs Jin that Clan Sakai is no more. He is without a place to call home for his actions. Also, Jin is no longer recognized as a samurai for his actions. More bad news though, as the Shogun have declared Jin a traitor, and the price is his head, to be taken by Lord Shimura as punishment. This leads to a duel with your uncle where you defeat him and are left with a choice: kill him or let him live. I chose to give our uncle an honorable death, and he was here to kill me, so I thought that was only fair. But really the choice doesn't affect the ending all too much, as if you let him live, regardless, you are still hunted by the Shogun for the rest of your days. But that's the main story for Ghost of Tsushima, and what a story it is. It's just honestly incredible. Again, I have to highlight Jin and Lord Shimura's conflict at the end of Act 2 because it really does highlight an important theme that the story has throughout.
If you continue down this path, you will be no better than the Mongols. I trained you to fight with honor.
Honor died on the beach. The Khan deserves to suffer.
You are ruled by your emotion.
I sacrificed everything I knew to save our people. I gave them hope. You did nothing!
This moment brings us back to the game's beginning. We've seen what fighting with so-called honor leads. It doesn't work against the Mongols. Khotun knows the rules we abide by, knows the best way to defeat the samurai is to fight outside these rules, and it's only when Jin or the Ghost begins to fight back without limits when the Khan becomes scared. Lord Shimura is stubborn. The rules to him are black and white, and he'd rather fight and die with honor than save Tsushima. This conflict between Jin and Lord Shimura is just a masterclass because, at least in my opinion, you completely understand why Jin is doing what needs to be done. We are helping the people of Tsushima. We give them hope that we can defeat the Mongols, hope that we can rise above and return back to normal. The ghost is not a symbol of fear for the people of Tsushima. It is a symbol of hope. That's why the conflict between Jin and Lord Shimura works so well. You feel the same way as Jin. You care for the people you are protecting because you spend so much time with them, and you've seen the horrendous things the Mongols are doing to our people. Seriously, when this moment happened...
Is this how you want to be remembered?
He defended us!
By spreading fear and chaos!
We are at war.
And you are acting like the enemy. This is not our way.
Your way can't save our people.
The Shogun will demand a head. But it does not have to be yours. I know
She drove you to this.
Uncle.
Renounce the ghost. You must blame her for this outrage. Tell them you are Jin Shimura, loyal servant to the Shogun. My heir. My son.
I am not your son. I am the ghost.
Legitimate goosebumps. I felt that. And maybe you won't or didn't, but to me, it's an eye for an eye mentality. More mature people may say be the bigger person, but that's not me. And that's why I think I found this story so damn intriguing. The game makes you question that mentality as well. The beginning of the third act, you have nothing. You've lost your horse, you don't know if you have any support, and the Mongols are using your tactics against you. You feel a little hopeless, and it's this contrast that made me so damn impressed with the main story. But this story is not just about Jin Sakai. This is a story bigger than us. This is a story about Tsushima. That's right, we're talking side stories now. Where to even begin with these? They're all something special in their own right. Let's start with Yuna. Yuna is the first person you meet after the failed battle of Komoda. She has nursed you back to health and seems like a kind and fragile woman at first, before she plays scared and brutally kills a Mongol. Yeah, Yuna has no rules. She's a thief and she will do whatever it takes to survive. And she is the one to push Jin in the same direction, which is where the conflict begins between her and Lord Shimura. However, it's through her backstory we learn how she got this way, and also leads into the fact that the Mongols are not the only enemy of Tsushima. Now, you can learn this information outside of Yuna's tale, but you really get a good look into the Japanese slavers and slave camps through her missions, as we even see the slave camp her and Taka once escaped from, and her terror at the thought of even entering.
Jin, I can't do this. I can't go back in there.
You don't have to. Stay here. I will deliver your vengeance.
Make them suffer, Jin. Taka. For every scar they gave us. For every head they collected from the tired workers who just asked for more water. Make them suffer for me.
Yuna has had a tough life. Her mother was abusive, she was captured and taken to a slave camp, and all she wants to do is survive this mess and head to the mainland. She doesn't care about Tsushima, she just wants to protect her brother and get the hell out of here. And you do get quite close to her throughout the game. This closeness is why Taka's death has the impact it does. Not only does Daisuke Tsuji act the crap out of this whole game, but this moment of pure resentment when Taka dies at the hands of the Khan, and just knowing how much you've let Yuna down really does hurt. She was so close to leaving Tsushima, and now she doesn't have anyone left, which, yes, is a theme for most of the characters we meet in the game. This leads me to Lady Masako, who, from the moment we meet her, has just lost everything. She's on a revenge tour right from the moment we meet her, and her tale is brutal. Someone has killed her family, and she wants everyone responsible dead. Immediately, you feel sorry for Masako, but it's about halfway through the tale that really got me. Searching Komoda Beach for her son's bodies was one you knew couldn't end well, but the screams of distress and anger when she finds them not only dead, but humiliated, is one that does hurt. You understand from the beginning why you need to help her find those responsible for her family's deaths. But seeing her broken by the sight of her sons just got to me.
No. Shigesato Yasanari! Strung up like animals.
My only issue with Lady Masako's story is she is slightly inconsistent and lets someone live, but then duels Jin because he's protecting someone to get more information. Other than that though, when it all comes to a head and we learn her own sister sent the killers, yeah, I just loved Lady Masako's story. She was a highlight of the side content. Sensei Ishikawa's tale revolves around hunting his student who is working for the Mongols and has betrayed him. I enjoyed this story, but for me, didn't have the same impact as the others. And same with Kenji, his missions really serve as a bit of a break from the seriousness, which is needed. Norio the warrior monk though, is another really interesting one. He is immediately a likable character, but as the other warrior monks are presumably dead via the Mongols, he hopes to retake his home. A lot of this tale is just learning more about Norio's respect for his brother, again presumed dead, and again he almost becomes a true friend to Jin. His demeanor quickly changes though once Norio finds his brother, or at least a husk of his brother. Enjo, Norio's brother, was brutally tortured, and to end his suffering, Norio must kill him, and this understandably breaks Norio, now seeking revenge. What I loved about Norio's tale is the final mission, that has very little gameplay. You just witness the power of pure revenge, and see Norio burn his brother's torturer alive, but it doesn't make him any happier. This tale really did sneak up on me and became one of my favorites. Norio is a badass. I have saved my favorite character for last though, because it's from her that we learn a lot about Jin and his family and almost immediately connect with her. I'm talking about Yuriko. For someone with just the 2 missions, she left an impact on me. Yuriko was Jin's caretaker and served his father, and it's from her that we learn more about Jin's father. She's also the sweetest person in the game, a true grandmother type, and you feel happy when you see Jin reunite with her. She spent so much time with Jin's father, remembers him for him, not just his death. And it's from her we learn he had been called the Demon of the Forest after ambushing some Ronin. He argued with Lord Shimura about tactics, and you begin to get the idea that maybe you're a lot like your father. I loved her last mission though. It's clear that she's battling with some form of dementia or Alzheimer's, and she does not have long left. But her final moments with Jin are very emotional. She constantly refers to Jin as his father, and confesses that while she was upset over Lady Sakai's death and Jin falling ill, the best day of her life was when Jin's father held her.
That night, you brought little Jin to me. And he was so sick after all that time in the forest. We had already lost Lady Sakai. Kazumasa, are you listening?
I'm listening.
I made him drink that remedy my mother taught me. We sat by his side the whole night. You held my hand. Do you remember?
Yes, I remember.
That night, I was so scared, so sad for little Jin. But But I was so happy. Does that make me a bad person?
No.
That moment gives me knots in the throat, and her passing just hit me. Yuriko was a surprise story that was one of my personal story highlights. Tsushima is literally jam-packed with stories to be told. I think there's roughly 60 or so side missions. Now I'm not going to go through all these stories because, well, at some point I need to talk about the gameplay. What I will say though about these one-off stories though is they feel natural, and I'll explain what I mean by this once we start talking about gameplay. Look, if you couldn't tell, I adored my time with Ghost of Tsushima's story. It can appear to be a slow starter, at least it did for me, but that's also because I was doing side missions as soon as I found them and didn't smash through the main story, which would have probably had a better flow. But again, the end of that second act was something special. The quest to stop the Mongols and free Tsushima was a journey filled with emotions, and that's in large part because of the incredible voice work. Seriously, when characters experience the many lows in the story, you feel it. So serious props to the voice actors, you killed it. I could go on, but I think you get it by this point, and we'd honestly be here forever if I was allowed to continue. So let's talk about the actual game aspect of Ghost of Tsushima. There's a lot of moving pieces in regards to Ghost of Tsushima's gameplay loop, so I think the best course of action is to go over each of the game's mechanics separately and then go over the gameplay loop when it all comes together. Let's start with combat. This aspect of Ghost of Tsushima actually took me by surprise because honestly I was expecting a similar system to Assassin's Creed. By that I mean a system that doesn't involve much thought, even a bit of a button masher, or just wait until you can assassinate someone sort of system. That isn't the case here at all. In fact, that playstyle will get you killed quite quickly. The sword-based combat in Ghost of Tsushima is similar to that of Nioh, as you really do just have a light and heavy attack, along with a blocking and parrying system, but the importance primarily revolves around your stance, of which there are 4. You have one for sword-wielding enemies, one for shields, one for spears and pole-based weapons, and one for big, heavy units. You'll unlock these stances as the game progresses, and these enemy types are more plentiful. But once you have each stance and you face a big group of Mongols, slowly taking them out one by one, switching your stance to inflict optimum damage, dodging and parrying, it feels great and makes you feel like a deadly samurai. This feeling is important because the enemies you face in this game, as I said, can end you and quickly, especially early on. Sucker Punch really made a point of rubbing it in if you lose a battle. Just seeing Jin crawl in defeat before being dealt the final blow, that makes you want to do better next time. I truly realized how much I'd learnt about the game's combat and how much more powerful I'd become once I went back to the starting area to do some leftover side activities, because there isn't much variety, not much armor on the enemies, you really do just destroy them. And that feeling of punishing enemy types that killed me in the beginning was fantastic and made me realize how much more the game evolved over time.
Hold your shit, boy, you're missing something. There needs to be a quick mention given to how many options of difficulty can factor into your experience while you rip through your enemies. While you can run through the game on normal, which is highly recommended so you can go through the natural progression curve the developers intended for you, you can modify the game in multiple ways without increasing the difficulty to the next mark, just if you want things a little bit harder. One of the simplest ways to do this would be using the Expert HUD, which removes the detection indicator when in stealth, the hit markers from the bow, enemies' health bars are greatly reduced in terms of feedback, as well as the little red flashes letting you know that you should sidestep that incoming attack being drastically reduced in terms of brightness and size. Even something as seemingly innocent as the Kurosawa mode, which I'll speak about in the visual section later, can make the difficulty curve have a sudden spike directly up into the stratosphere. Why? Because turning the game black and white will change one minor thing in combat. One thing that you'll definitely be able to adjust to, but it's going to be a painful learning process. That effect being that the little red and blue flashes that help you distinguish what attacks you can parry and which ones you must dodge look exactly the same in Kurosawa mode. Long story short, if you hate yourself or think Dark Souls made you get good, you can play Ghosts of Tsushima in a painfully hard manner, just like how the true gamers like it. Anyway, back to that MayorHairBear guy, I guess.
Ghost of Tsushima's best aspect in regards to gameplay is the perfect drip feed of content. You're always fighting new enemies, progressively learning how to deal with said enemies, and then the enemies learn something new like poison and you're back on the back foot. The game has that great balance of feeling unstoppable and feeling fragile, and that balance is what makes the combat so intriguing and fun to play. You don't just have your sword though, you also have a bow and some quick items like the kunais, sticky bombs, black powder bombs, and later an item that can ignite your blade briefly. These extra weapons are important because for the most part you're facing the Mongols alone, which can be a lot at times, so you do need the extra help. The kunais stun enemies, leaving them open to more damage. The bombs can at minimum stun enemies if not kill them outright. The flame blade, I'll be honest, seemed to burn out a little quickly, but it's there. And the bow is a lifesaver as it will kill any enemy in one hit if you hit them in the head and they don't have armor, which is great for the big enemies. You mix in all these extra weapons plus switching stances plus dodging or parrying and any combos you may learn along your way. Again, it's a good amount of things to think about so that when you actually pull it all off and without a scratch, I mean, yeah, you feel the best because it can all so quickly go sideways. The best fights in this game though have to be the duels, and the reason I say this is because it highlights your knowledge of the combat without the extra layers. The duels in this game are not easy. You can never be too confident because no matter how low your opponent's health is, again, you can still be destroyed with ease. I'll be honest, most duels took me a couple of tries to beat, and it's all due to the fact that you need to pay attention. These fights are what I love about the Souls and Souls-like games. The duels are about learning patterns, what attacks the enemy has, what tell that enemy gives before an attack, what attacks to block, what attacks to parry, what attacks to dodge, and when it's safe to attack. These questions all need to be answered in order for you to win the fight, and in these battles, you only really have your katana, so it's literally mono e mono, which only enhances that feeling of satisfaction and joy when you win these battles. These duels are true samurai moments, and they're a true highlight in Ghost of Tsushima. Back to the regular combat though, which leads me to preparation. More often than not, you'll be able to plan your attack against your foes, especially in regards to liberating camps and settlements. This is where you can be as honorable or dishonorable as you please, and more often than not, I was very much dishonorable because it just feels good. If you choose the path of honor though, before an engagement you'll be prompted with the standoff option, which allows you to face a group of enemies one-on-one, and if you're successful, killing at least one enemy and up to 5 with upgrades and the upgraded Sakai armor, very quickly with a single slash of your blade. This can be a great way to deal with a smaller group of enemies, and with the ghost armor, even scare enemies off as you wait patiently for the enemy to attack before you swing your blade. The problem is you can also leave yourself in a horrible position, especially as the game progresses and your enemies will attempt to fake you out more and more. So there is a real risk and reward system in place, which is a great option. The better option though is via stealth and not being a very good samurai. You just have more reward with less risk this way, at least the further along you get. There are a lot of places Jin can hide in Tsushima, so it almost invites a stealthy approach, with easy assassinations, taking people out with your bow, using wind chimes or firecrackers to lure enemies where you want them, and the more this progresses and you upgrade your assassin's blade, the quicker the assassinations are, the more people you can assassinate at once. The poison or berserker darts are a great option, or fire arrows burning people in longer grass. It is a lot of fun, at least I thought so, to be the ghost and clear out camps this way. And the worst case is you get caught and just fight them or slink away and hide. It also just feels good to be the ghost. Emphasize that legend, and you feel like a true ninja with the fully upgraded assassin's blade that just quickly shanks an enemy. The stealth mechanics may not be the most complex, but it still is just a blast to be a sneaky boy. I have saved the combat's most badass feature for last though, and that's the ghost mode. All of Jin's anger unleashes. The ghost becomes realized and you just slay anyone in your path. It's an easy activation whenever it becomes available. It looks incredible and feels somehow even better because of the hardships I mentioned early on in the game, and you gain access to this ability at the perfect time. As I mentioned with the standoffs though, combat does have player controlled options that can boost your stats, if you will. There is a lot you can improve on in Ghost of Tsushima. Each armor set has different stats, such as more health, more easily hidden, boost to parrying, etc., which can all be upgraded into not only looking cooler, but also actually being better. Then you have weapon upgrades to your swords and bows for more damage, and upgrades to your secondary weapons, I guess. I don't know what to group these as, but you can upgrade these to have more of them, have them hit harder or be louder, but that's still not all, as you can not only upgrade Jin through skill points, but also find further upgrades around the world. Yes, the upgrades leads me to the elephant in the room, and the reason I'm sure some of you watching may think you're not interested in Ghost of Tsushima, the open world. I'll be honest, it was an area that did make me skeptical at first, because whilst I do enjoy these games, it's not a consistent genre for me. Ghost of Tsushima's world though, and how it gets you to explore that world, is something special. There is no objective markers, at least until you're up close. No. Instead, you're left to follow the wind, which leads you to looking at the way the grass and leaves are blowing, and because you're doing that, you're paying attention to what's around you on your way to your objective, and that's when Ghost of Tsushima gets you. You are told in the game's beginning to look out for yellow birds and foxes, as they will lead you to something. At first, I almost shrugged this off, like, how am I going to notice that? But because of the way the game directs you without you glaring at a marker, you begin to look at the environment more. You pick up on where fox dens are, or a bird will fly near you, and then before you know it, you're making a detour to a fox shrine or wherever this bird is going. The amount of time I spent following animals in this game easily took up to 10 to 15 hours of game time. It was ridiculous, but I loved it. The way Tsushima is built and how much content there is to be done within it is something special. But even better is how it makes you want to do everything it has to offer. Again, there's always the allure of that reward. More stories to be told, a new ability to be learned, a new armor set, more upgrade materials, health upgrades, health refills, charms, and charm slots. And even when I felt like I had enough stuff, I was still compelled to do everything I possibly could because the missions and objectives are no less enjoyable. Taking out bandits, slavers and Mongols, following murderers or learning if there's any truth to myths around the island, following tracks and eavesdropping, scaling a shrine, completing bamboo challenges, the list goes on, and at least for me, it was always a good time. There is just so much to do in Tsushima and so many different ways of playing the game that I just couldn't put the game down. I'm not a completionist type or a trophy hunter, but any excuse to spend more time in this world, I had to take it. I loved the different approaches to combat, the amount of variety at your fingertips, and how your decisions actually affect the world itself. The more you dishonor your code, the darker and gloomier the weather becomes. And even though it's a simple flute play away from being sunnier, it feels like an impactful choice. Each environment is unique. Each upgrade or new ability feels like a true reward. Each duel feels intense. Each mission, when accompanied by their own story, feels interesting, even when they stick to a formula like killing someone or following someone. It didn't matter because the story gave each mission that variety. Honestly, when I think of complaints in regards to the gameplay, it all just feels like I'm nitpicking. I mean, towards the end of my journey, when I was just going after the leftover collectibles, I was encountering a few too many rogue Mongol squads that got a little tedious. Maybe some awkward camera angles or the camera hugging Jin's ass a little too closely. Too many functions mapped to one button. The frame rate dropped for me noticeably in the Khotan Khan fight, but that was the only time I noticed. Sometimes in the tailing missions, the alert for losing a target would appear even though I could still see the target, and a glitch here and there, but they were never at the forefront of my mind. I was constantly interested in seeing what else Ghost of Tsushima had to offer. I was immersed in this world. I was invested in saving it by any means necessary, and through the gameplay, you do truly feel like the Ghost of Tsushima. In terms of visuals, Ghost of Tsushima is one of the most beautiful games I've ever played. This video and YouTube's compression just doesn't do the game justice. You have to see it for yourself because I'm honestly stunned that this game runs well and looks this incredible on my day one PS4. Yes, the PS4 may sound like it's about to take off, but that seems to be the console at this point. Now, whilst you may be able to point out games with better technical visuals, I don't know what happened to the seagull models, but that is what it is. As a package, there is nothing quite like this game. Not only is this game a beautiful representation of Japanese culture and the country's natural beauty, but its clear sucker punch wanted to respect and honor Akira Kurosawa. I'll be honest, I didn't play the game in Kurosawa mode at all because I was too in love with the color palette of this game. But even just from the way the cutscenes and moments in combat are shot and positioned, to me was enough to really show how much love the team had for Kurosawa's work.
Love would be putting it very mildly, my fam. Not only did the team emulate the traditional black and white aesthetic that was Kurosawa's trademark, but they even copied more subtle elements, even down to the detail of how many torches or open fires you'd see in the cutscenes for the game, whilst also changing elements of the audio itself to be more in line with the older films that are influencing people in the industry to this very day. But this isn't my primary section, so I'm gonna shut my mouth and let you listen to Mayor for a little bit longer.
Again though, what really caught my eye was Tsushima itself, and just how much variety there is to look at. The colors are just eye-catching. The way the environment moves around you and at times almost engulfs you is a thing of beauty. The snow, the rain, the sunset or sunrise not only make each environment feel different each time you venture through, but depending on the weather or time of day, you may have something new catch your eye each time. Maybe due to the fog you couldn't see how vast a view was, or with the bright sun in your eyes you didn't notice just how much these flowers popped out at you. It's moments like these where the visuals, the story, and the gameplay all come together. Moments of beauty as you fight off the Mongols, all in the hope of saving your home, immerses you. The perfect blend of all the game has to offer though is when you come across areas destroyed by the Mongols, homes burnt to a crisp, all the flora and fauna dead, and the people we are trying to protect already gone and humiliated. There is something special about these moments. They are so different than any other environment in the game because they do evoke so much emotion. You get used to how beautiful Tsushima is, and that's why moments like these are important. In the story we may be succeeding, but the people of Tsushima are still not safe. The Mongols and threats are still out there, and it's up to you to go and fix that. It's important to have a visual representation of emotions and stories, and Ghost of Tsushima does this with ease, it seems. We see what we're fighting for and how it's being taken away regularly. Through stories, we talk to people of Tsushima and try and resolve their problems, but we're also too late to help others. It's that great yin and yang balance of the positives and beauty versus the negatives and the destruction that helps further the immersive feeling I got whilst playing. The visuals for Ghost of Tsushima just feel like they tie the whole experience together, and they're a big reason why so many aspects of this game that I've talked about work as well as they do.
Right, let your boy chime in for a bit. As Mayor has already said, this game is hella pretty for almost every moment it's running. There's a few special slices of the experience that stand on their own feet, but it's not just the visuals that make that possible. The visual element of a cinematic sequence, whether that's a title drop or the lead up to one of the duels, is only half of the recipe. The other half is the outstanding soundtrack that Ian Eshikiri and Shigeru Umebayashi put together. Between these two men, they've got enough music credentials that date back to the 80s, having more than a few notable movies to their credit prior to this outing. The first and easiest example of the raw impact that this soundtrack can carry with it is in the title drop, because the moment the music swirls in that opening sequence, control is handed to the player. The credits for Sucker Punch appear, and you're reminded of the game you're going to be locked into for the next few days. It's no exaggeration to say that this game looks and sounds like a movie in multiple points. Again, the title drop and preceding brief horse ride are an easy example. The first time you have to fight with Ryuzo in the mission to finally free Lord Shimura begins with the strum of a traditional Japanese lute known as a samisen, a massive 3-stringed instrument that resonates with a sound similar to a banjo, before the score creeps in with brass and percussion instruments to build the scene up just before the duel begins, with someone who's established to be a very, very capable swordsman.
Ryuzo.
The Khan put a bounty on the ghost. Anyone can claim it.
Help me save my uncle, and he will reward your men. He will make you samurai. Ryuzo.
He's your family, Jin. I need to protect mine.
Even the second encounter with Ryuzo in one of the most important sequences in the entire game from a character development perspective. The music immediately starts with the hardline brass and drums dominating the soundscape, intermingling with the voices until Ryuzo tries to talk with Jin. Another traditional instrument called the shakuhachi creeps in with its distinctive flute notes, just before the drums begin to overtake it in an almost painfully slow manner, right before the strings come flooding back to play in harmony with the shakuhachi as that final duel with an old friend begins.
Jin!
Where's the Khan?
He rode north. Made me stay behind to collect the ghost's head.
Then come claim it.
No. I could have killed you earlier. Instead, I convinced the Khan to give you a chance.
He murdered Taka.
And you slaughtered my men. I've lost everything. Except you. We can defeat the Mongols together.
After everything you've done!
Tell the people I was your spy. Sent to gain the Khan's trust. They'll believe the ghost.
Stop! You are my oldest friend, Ryuzo. Surrender. And answer for your crimes. For both our sakes.
I can't.
Those are just a few examples from the mainline story, but the same approach to that cinematic flair, those subtle touches between the sound design and the composition to enhance the moments on screen, can be seen throughout the game. Even with the brief pause at the start of the many duels you'll have throughout the experience, just to pronounce the sound of Jin using his thumb to release the tension on his katana, ready to draw it for the coming fight. The soundtrack in Ghost of Tsushima is incredibly well composed, and the syncing up between the sound design and the rest of the in-game elements is masterfully done, and serves in pulling some major weight in making the game feel, look, and sound like an interactive movie. It's one hell of a game to listen to. Even the raw soundtrack by itself, completely removed from the game, is wonderful to listen to. If you like this sort of analysis and rambling about the noises a game makes, please check out your boy's channel. I tend to talk about it in every video, but I think that's enough from me this time. Best let Mayor come back and do some actual work in his own video. Okay, thanks, love you, bye.
Ghost of Tsushima is incredible. It's a game I truly do have a hard time faulting, which may mean this isn't exactly a critique. I just enjoyed so much about what this game did though. The story was immediately interesting, and yet by the end had me absolutely enthralled. The gameplay is always adding something new to the table, and that results in the game never really getting old, which for a game I spent over 40 hours in, is impressive to say the least. Visually, I was astounded at how good this game looks and how well it integrates the visuals with the rest of the game. When you wrap it all together, yes, it has some small issues, but I just think Ghost of Tsushima is a must-play game. It's one of my favorites from this console generation by far, and as much as I love the Sly Cooper and Infamous series, Sucker Punch really did outdo themselves with Ghost of Tsushima. If you watched through the video and hadn't played the game for yourself, go and fix that. I could make a 6-hour long video and I wouldn't be able to cover everything this game has to offer, so there is still more to discover for yourself. This isn't where Ghost of Tsushima ends though. There is more coming to this game in an upcoming co-op mode, and I look forward to playing that once it releases. But look, The bottom line is, at the end of the day, Ghost of Tsushima is a game that once this year is over, I will remember my experience with it for a long time.